The war drum had not finished its third beat before Sharamph Ashwalker drove the butt of her spear into Thok Bloodfin's ribs and put him flat on his back in the thrashing dust, the whole gathered clan roaring around them in a circle of firelight and turning windmill shadows. "Yield the suit," she said, standing over him with her braid whipping in the wind that never stopped up on the plateau. "Or I put the point through your shoulder next, and you go home to your father with a hole in you instead of a bride." Thok Bloodfin groaned, spat blood into the gold stubble of the harvested field, and did not get up. Around the ring, elders in fur-trimmed cloaks murmured to one another, and somewhere behind them the great sails of the nearest windmill groaned as they turned, dragging their long shadows across the crowd like slow black fingers. "Enough," called Chief Borug Ashwalker, striding into the ring with his arms crossed over a chest like a barrel of iron. He was a mountain of a man, gray-tusked, his voice a rumble that could carry over a battlefield, and right now it was tight with exhaustion. "Sharamph, that is the fourth suitor you have put in the dirt this season. The Bloodfin clan sent Thok in good faith, with cattle and bronze as bride price, and you have broken 2 of his ribs in front of his own kin." "He put his hand on me before I gave leave," Sharamph said, and she did not lower the spear. "I do not care whose son he is. No man touches me because his clan wants my father's grain." A ripple of laughter went through some of the younger warriors, quickly stifled when Borug's eyes swept over them. Sharamph stood tall in her fitted travel leathers, dark hide laced snug across her stomach and up over broad, powerful shoulders, the leather worn soft and supple from years of riding and fighting, hugging the curve of her waist before flaring at the hip, where a long knife rode in a sheath stitched with bone beads. Her tusks were small and neat for an orc woman, her skin a deep mossy green that caught the firelight like polished stone, and her black eyes, when she turned them on the crowd, made grown warriors look elsewhere. "There will not be a 5th suitor," she said. "There will not be a 6th. I am done standing in this circle while men who have never spoken 10 true words to me try to win me like a prize goat at a fair." "You are the chief's only living daughter," said Elder Vashna, stepping forward from the shadow of the nearest tent, her withered face unreadable in the firelight, her voice smooth as poured oil. "The clans expect an alliance. The harvest was thin this year, child. We need friends before the snow." "Then find friends," Sharamph said. "Do not sell me for them." She turned on her heel, spear still in hand, and walked out of the circle while the fire popped and the windmills groaned overhead, and nobody, not even her father, called her back. That night she saddled her gray mare beneath a sky bruised purple with the last of dusk, and she did not tell a single soul in the camp where she meant to ride, because the truth of it would have sounded, to any of them, like madness. 2 days' ride down out of the Goldreach Plateau, past the last windmill and down the long chalky road that wound toward the coast, there was a rough little harbor town called Saltmere, and in that town there was a shipwright named Nathan Holloway who did not know her name at all. She had met him only once, half a year before, at the autumn trade fair where the clan brought grain and wool down to sell for iron nails, rope, salt, and the coin they needed for the lean months. Her wagon axle had cracked on the coast road 2 miles outside the fairgrounds, and while the clan's own smith cursed and hammered uselessly at the iron collar, a lean, sun-browned human with sawdust in his hair and calluses like bark on his hands, had simply climbed under the wagon without asking permission, studied the brake for the space of 3 breaths, and said, in a voice that did not shake even though he was close enough to smell the leather and iron of an armed orc woman above him, "It is not the axle, it is the hub. Somebody carved it too thin and it has been splitting slow for a year. I can shim it, but you will want a new one before winter." He had fixed it in under an hour, working with a quiet, competent patience that reminded her of nothing so much as the windmills back home, turning steady, and sure no matter what wind came at them. He had not asked for coin beyond what the work was worth. He had not stared at her tusks or flinched when her hand brushed his passing him a tool. When she thanked him, he had ducked his head, said it was nothing, and gone back to whatever he had been doing before, As if fixing a war-clan's wagon and speaking civilly to an orc woman twice, his weight in muscle, was simply another Tuesday of his life. She had thought of him more times than she wanted to admit in the 6 months since. Not because he was beautiful, though there was something honest and clean-lined about him that she liked, all lean muscle and quiet eyes the color of harbor water. Because he had looked at her like a person who had a wagon problem, not like a monster to fear or a prize to win. No suitor her clan had sent in a year had ever managed that. The road down from the plateau ran through wind-combed grass and then dropped, mile by mile, toward the smell of salt and tar, and Sharamph rode it through one whole day and half a night, sleeping only a few hours wrapped in her cloak beneath a lonely standing stone, before she pushed on again at first light. By the middle of the second day, the golden fields had given way to gray rock and gorse, and by evening she smelled wood smoke, fish and pitch, and heard the clang of a smith's hammer, and knew she had come to Saltmere. The town clung to a rocky harbor like a barnacle, low stone buildings roofed in slate, fishing boats, and one battered merchant cog rocking at anchor, nets drying on racks along the strand. It was not a place that saw many orcs, and the few humans on the street stopped what they were doing to watch her ride in, one hand drifting toward hip knives, mothers pulling children back from doorways. Sharamph kept her spine straight and her chin level and did not look at any of them, because if she looked at every human who stared at her like she might eat their goats, she would never get where she was going. She found the shipyard by the smell of fresh-cut oak and the sound of a mallet driving pegs, down near the end of the strand where 3 half-built hulls sat in wooden cradles. She swung down off her mare, tied the reins to a mooring post, and walked in through the gate, and there he was, up on a scaffold beside the ribs of an unfinished boat, shirt off in the last heat of the day, driving a wooden trenail home with 3 hard, economical strikes of a mallet. He looked down when her shadow crossed the yard, squinted against the sun, and went very still. "You are the one who fixed my wagon," Sharamph said, "at the autumn fair. 6 months gone." Nathan Holloway set the mallet down slowly on the scaffold rail, climbed down a short ladder with the careful economy of a man who has fallen off enough ladders to respect them, and stood facing her across 10 feet of sawdust and shavings, wiping his hands on a rag tucked in his belt. He was leaner than she remembered, or maybe she simply remembered him wrong, but the eyes were the same, steady and gray-green like a calm sea before a storm nobody else could see coming yet. "I remember," he said carefully. "The axle hub. You did not stay long enough for me to learn your name." "Sharamph," she said. "Sharamph Ashwalker, daughter of Chief Borug Ashwalker of the Goldreach clans." Something shifted behind his eyes, a fast calculation, the kind of look a man gets when he understands all at once that the ground under him has changed shape. Around the yard, other dockhands had stopped their work to watch, and a knot of townsfolk had gathered loosely by the gate, drawn by the sight of a mounted orc woman standing toe-to-toe with one of their own. "That is a chief's daughter," Nathan said slowly, "standing in my shipyard. It is." "Why?" Sharamph had rehearsed nothing on the ride down. She had spent 2 days telling herself she would know what to say when she arrived, and now, standing in front of him with sawdust drifting between them on the evening wind and half the town watching, the only thing that felt true was the plain truth. "My clan has sent me 4 suitors this year," she said, loud enough that the gathered crowd could hear every word, because she found, standing there, that she did not care if they did. "Warriors, chief's sons, one man old enough to be my father twice over. I put every one of them in the dirt because I did not want them. I have ridden 2 days to tell you that I want you, Nathan Holloway, shipwright of Saltmere, though you never sent for me and never asked my father for my hand, and probably never once in your life thought an orc chief's daughter would ride down out of the hills for you." The yard had gone entirely silent. Somewhere a gull screamed over the harbor, and a rope slapped against a mast, and Nathan Holloway stood there with sawdust on his bare shoulders, looking at her the way a man looks at whether he cannot outrun and is not entirely sure he wants to. "I never applied," he said, and there was a rough, startled laugh underneath the words, like it had escaped before he could stop it. "I did not even know there was a line to stand in." "There was not a line," Sharamph said. "There was a herd of men my father's elders picked for me, and none of them were you, and I have decided I am done letting other people choose who touches my heart." From the gate, a heavy-set man in a dockmaster's coat pushed forward, face red with something between fear and outrage. "Now see here," he barked. "We do not need orc business brought into this harbor. Holloway, tell her to ride on back up her mountain before she brings her whole war band down on our roofs." Nathan turned on him with a sharpness that surprised even Sharamph. "Nobody's roof is threatened, Garrick." She fixed nothing but a wagon and asked a question. "Go back to your ledgers." The dockmaster sputtered but retreated, muttering, and the small crowd began, slowly, unhappily, to disperse, though more than one face lingered at windows and doorways long after. Sharamph watched Nathan watch them go, and something in her chest, some hard, coiled thing she had carried up and down that plateau for a year, loosened by half an inch. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I did not have to fix your axle either," Nathan said. "But here we are." He studied her for a long moment, and she let him, standing still under that gray-green gaze the way she would not have stood still for a spear point. "I do not know the first thing about orc courting customs, Sharamph Ashwalker. I do not know if there is a right way to answer a woman who rides 2 days to tell a stranger she wants him. But I know I have thought about you more than a man ought to think about someone he met once over a broken wagon, and I never let myself hope it meant anything. Because what would a chief's daughter want with a dockhand who owns one good shirt and a half-built boat he cannot afford to finish?" "I do not want your shirt," she said, and for the first time since the fire pit 2 nights ago, something like a smile pulled at her mouth. "I want to know if you would let me stay long enough to find out whether this is worth 2 days in a saddle." Nathan Holloway looked at her for a long, long moment, the harbor wind moving between them, and then he held out his hand, palm up, the way a man offers help down off a wagon, though they both knew that was not really what he was offering at all. "Stay," he said. "I will make room." That first night he gave her his own narrow bed in the loft above the shipyard's tool shed, and slept on a pallet of sailcloth by the door, which made her laugh out loud in the dark, a low, rough sound that startled him. "You rode 2 days to find me, and now you will not even share a room properly," she said. "I am being a gentleman," Nathan said stiffly, and she laughed again, and outside the gulls screamed over the harbor and the tide came in against the hull cradles, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sharamph Ashwalker fell asleep without dreaming of fire circles and men she did not want. The trouble was that Saltmere was not built to hold an orc woman gently. In the days that followed, Sharamph helped Nathan in the shipyard, learning the names of tools and the grain of oak and elm, and some of the dockhands warmed to her quickly enough, drawn by the novelty of watching her haul timbers 2 men together could not lift. But others did not warm at all. A fishmonger's wife spat near her boots in the market and called her a war beast to her husband's face, loud enough for Sharamph to hear every word. A pair of drunk sailors cornered Nathan one evening near the tavern, shoving him against a barrel stack, demanding to know if he had lost his mind bedding down with a monster who would eat him in his sleep, and Sharamph came around the corner in time to see one of them draw back a fist. She did not draw her knife. She simply caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted it until he dropped to his knees with a yelp and held him there, bent double over the cobbles, while she looked at his companion with black eyes gone flat and cold. "He is mine," she said, quiet and clear, "and the next hand that touches him in anger I will make sure never closes into a fist again." The sailors fled. Nathan straightened his shirt, rubbed his shoulder where the barrel had caught him, and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You did not have to do that either," he said, though there was no real complaint in it. "I know," Sharamph said. "I wanted to." It was 2 nights after that, on the strand below the shipyard with the tide far out and the moon laying a long silver road across the wet sand, that he kissed her first. She had been telling him, haltingly, about the fire circle and Thok Bloodfin and the 4 suitors before him, about how tired she was of being a piece on somebody else's board, and he had listened the way he listened to everything, quiet and whole, and when she finished he had reached up, slow enough that she could have stopped him a dozen times over, and touched her jaw with rough, careful fingers, and she had leaned into it before either of them decided anything at all. The kiss that followed was not gentle exactly, not at first. 2 people who had spent weeks not touching finally letting themselves, and when they broke apart they were both breathing like they had run the length of the strand. "I did not ride 2 days for a kiss on a beach," Sharamph said against his mouth, half laughing, half something rower. "No," Nathan agreed, "but it is a fair start." He came with her when she rode back up to the plateau 2 weeks later, not because she asked him twice, but because she asked him once and meant it with her whole chest, and because he told her plainly while they packed his few tools onto a borrowed mule. A man could only spend so long building other men's boats before he wondered what it might feel like to build something of his own instead. The ride up took the better part of 2 days again, this time with him beside her, and she watched him take in the plateau as it rose out of the coastal haze, gold and endless, crowned along every ridge with windmills, their great canvas sails turning slow and steady against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "I have never seen so many at once," he said, reining the mule in without meaning to, just to look. "Back home we had 1 mill for the whole valley. This is a forest of them." "My grandmother's grandmother raised the first 3, Sharamph said, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. "Before that, we ground grain by hand and traded half of what we grew just to have flour through winter. The mills are why the Ashwalker clan does not starve when the harvest is thin." "They are beautiful," Nathan said, and meant it, and something in Sharamph warmed at hearing a human call any part of her home beautiful without a trace of fear in his voice. The clan's camp sat along the plateau's northern ridge, a sprawl of hide tents and low stone cottages built up over generations, smoke rising from cook fires, children chasing a leather ball between the mill towers, and when Sharamph rode in with a human man on a mule beside her, the whole camp turned to stare exactly as the harbor town had, only louder. Chief Borug came out of his cottage before she had even swung down from the saddle, his face a thundercloud, Elder Vashna a pace behind him with her thin mouth already pursed for argument. "You have been gone 18 days, Borug said, with no word, no rider sent home, and now you return with," his eyes swept over Nathan with open disbelief, "with a human." "His name is Nathan Holloway," Sharamph said, dismounting, standing between her father and the man she had ridden 2 days to find, chin lifted the same way it had been lifted in the fire circle. "He is a shipwright. He fixed my wagon axle at the autumn fair, and I have decided I want him. And I did not ride to Saltmere to ask anyone's permission, because I have refused every suitor this clan sent me, and I am done being told who I am allowed to love." The word love, said plainly and in front of the whole gathering camp, drew a low murmur that ran through the crowd like wind through grain. Borug's jaw worked. Vashna's face, Sharamph would later think back on and curse herself for not reading more carefully, went carefully, deliberately smooth. "A human," Borug said again, quieter now, almost tired. "Sharamph, there is history between our peoples that does not wash away because one man was kind to you at a trade fair." "I know the history, father," Sharamph said. "I have heard the songs about the border wars since I was old enough to walk. I am not asking you to forget them. I am asking you to look at the man standing beside me instead of the history standing behind him." Nathan, to his credit, did not shrink under the weight of 100 staring orcs, though Sharamph could feel, through the arm she kept lightly against his, that his heart was going like a hammer. He stepped forward, inclined his head to Borug with the same plain courtesy he gave everyone, and said, "Chief Borug, I did not come here to take anything from your clan. I came because your daughter asked me to, and because I have not been able to stop thinking about her since the day she rode into my shipyard with a broken axle and a look on her face like she dared the world to tell her no. I am handy with wood and rope. I will work for my place here if you will let me try." There was a long silence, broken only by the endless turning creak of the nearest windmill, and then Borg let out a breath like a man setting down a heavy load and said, "The mills on the eastern ridge have needed new gearing for 2 seasons, and no one in this camp can shape wood fine enough to fix them properly. If you can mend a mill, shipwright, you may stay long enough to prove whether you are worth the trouble my daughter has gone to for you. If you cannot, you will ride back down that road before the snow." It was not a blessing, but it was not a refusal either, and Sharamph, watching her father turn and stalk back into his cottage with Vashna trailing close behind, felt something in her chest unclench for the second time in a month. The eastern mills, it turned out, were in worse shape than anyone had admitted, their wooden gears worn smooth and slipping, one tower's whole cap frozen half-turned from a broken brake beam, and Nathan spent the first week climbing through their dusty timber guts with a lantern and a notebook, muttering half to himself about tooth pitch and shaft alignment in a way that made the clan's own carpenter, a stout, gray-bearded orc named Dunrath, watch him first with suspicion, and then slowly, with grudging professional respect. "He knows his joints," Dunrath admitted to Sharamph one evening, watching Nathan sight down a new gear tooth by torchlight. "For a human. I did not think they had it in them, working wood that fine. He built ships that cross open water in storms," Sharamph said. "I think he has it in him." She found herself drawn to the mill towers in the evenings, climbing the ladders to sit beside him while he worked, passing him tools before he asked for them, learning without meaning to the vocabulary of his trade the way he had learned hers. There was an ease that grew between them in those weeks, quiet and unhurried, made of small things. Him teaching her to tie a shipwright's knot and laughing when her huge, strong fingers made it look easy on the first try. Her teaching him the clan's harvest songs, badly, both of them off-key in the dark beneath turning sails. The night he kissed the inside of her wrist, slow and deliberate, after she had spent an hour picking splinters out of his palm by lamplight, and told her, low and rough, that he had never in his life felt as sure of anything as he felt about wanting to stay near her. Not everyone in the camp warmed so easily. Thok Bloodfin, still nursing bruised ribs and a bruised pride, made no secret of his contempt, muttering to anyone who would listen that a chief's daughter had thrown away 4 honorable warriors for a human who could not even lift a full grain sack. And elder Vashna, though she said little openly, watched Nathan work with an expression Sharamph could not quite name, something calculating behind her age-clouded eyes that Sharamph told herself at the time was simple distrust of an outsider and nothing more. It was Vashna who first suggested, at a gathering of the clan's council a month after Nathan's arrival, that perhaps the Eastern Mills' troubles were not simple where after all. 3 towers failing within a season, all in the same district, Vashna said, laying it out with the careful patience of a woman who has planned exactly how a conversation will go. The brake beam on the north tower did not merely wear through. It was cut, and cut cleanly, by a blade, not by age. I say this not to frighten the camp, but because I think we must ask ourselves whether someone wishes the Ashwalker clan to starve this winter. The council chamber, a broad stone-walled cottage lit by oil lamps, went very still. Sharamph, seated near her father, felt Nathan stiffen beside her. "I looked at that beam myself," Nathan said. "She is right. It was cut. I assumed at first it might have been an accident of the saw when it was first hewn, badly finished timber failing along an old flaw, but a flaw does not leave a mark like a knife stroke across the grain. And you would know," Thok said from across the chamber, not quite hiding the sneer in his voice, "having spent your whole life among humans who make war on us with exactly such knives." "Enough," Borg rumbled, before Sharamph could answer for herself, which she had every intention of doing loudly. "If the beam was cut, We have a saboteur in this camp, human blade or orc blade, and that is a graver matter than anyone's wounded pride, Thok. I want the eastern towers watched day and night, starting tonight. Sharamph volunteered before anyone else could speak, and Nathan volunteered in the same breath, and though Vashna's mouth tightened at that, she said nothing to stop it, only nodded slowly, as if filing the arrangement away for later use. The first 2 nights of watching passed quietly, nothing but wind and the endless turning creak of sails overhead, Nathan and Sharamph sharing a small fire at the base of the North Tower, talking in low voices about nothing and everything, her head eventually finding his shoulder as the stars wheeled overhead, both of them more at ease in each other's silence than either had been with anyone in years. It was on the 3rd night that they heard the horses. Not clan horses, ridden loose and easy the way orcs rode, but a tight, disciplined column, moving with deliberate quiet along the ridge trail below the towers, torches unlit, the jingle of harness muffled with cloth wrapping. Sharamph was on her feet with her knife drawn before Nathan had even fully registered the sound. Bandits, she breathed, or raiders, too quiet for a trade caravan, too many for a hunting party. She counted shapes in the starlight, a dozen at least, moving toward the granary sheds that clustered at the foot of the ridge, where the clan stored the last of the harvested grain before the mills could finish grinding it for winter. They are going for the stores. We cannot fight a dozen riders alone, Nathan said, already moving, grabbing the signal horn that hung on the tower ladder for exactly this purpose. We do not have to fight them, Sharamph said. We only have to wake the whole camp before they reach the sheds. Nathan put the horn to his lips and blew 3 long blasts that tore across the sleeping plateau, and below them, torches began flaring to life across the camp, shouts rising, warriors spilling out of tents with spears and axes half-strapped. The riders below, hearing the alarm, broke their careful silence and charged the sheds outright, torches suddenly blazing, clearly meaning to burn what they could not steal before the camp could organize a defense. What followed was not the battle of songs, not some grand clash of armies, but a chaotic, terrifying scramble in the dark, orcs pouring down off the ridge to meet the raiders at the granary line, torchlight and shouting and the screech of steel, while Sharamph and Nathan half climbed, half ran down the steep tower ladder to join the fray. Sharamph reached the ground first, threw herself into the melee with a war cry that turned more than one raider's horse to sudden panic, and Nathan, unarmed but for a belt knife, found himself hauling a fallen clan boy out of the path of a raider's mount, dragging the child bodily behind an overturned cart, even as an arrow hissed through the space where his own head had been a heartbeat before. The raid broke within a quarter hour, the attackers realizing too late that they had lost the element of surprise against a war clan roused and armed, and they wheeled and fled into the dark, leaving 2 of their own dead in the trampled grass, and more tellingly, a single dropped saddlebag that Sharamph scooped up herself before anyone else could reach it. Inside, beneath a layer of stolen coin, was a folded letter bearing no seal, written in a careful, educated hand that named the eastern towers specifically, described the layout of the granary sheds in exact detail, and closed with a line that made Sharamph's blood run cold even before she fully understood it. The girl and her human pet will be at the North Tower most nights now. Use that. Someone in this camp told them where to find us, Nathan said quietly, reading over her shoulder. And when? Sharamph looked up from the letter at the fires still burning along the granary line, at the frightened faces of children being herded back toward the cottages, at her father striding through the chaos shouting orders, and felt something cold and furious settle into her chest. Someone we trust, she said. Someone who knew exactly where we would be watching. The council met again the next morning, grim and shaken. The letter passed hand to hand while Borug demanded answers no one seemed able to give. Vashna, when the letter reached her, studied it for a long moment with an expression of appropriate horror, and then said, in a voice pitched perfectly to sound like careful reason, "This hand is educated, precise. I would wager it belongs to someone who has spent time among humans, learning their letters. Someone, and here her clouded eyes flicked, just for a moment, toward Nathan, who might have reason to want this clan destabilized, and who would know exactly where the human and the chief's daughter kept their watch. The chamber's attention swung toward Nathan like a struck bell, and Sharamph felt him go rigid beside her, felt the old fear in him, the fear of a man who has always known how quickly a room full of strangers can turn. "He does not write like this," Sharamph said before anyone else could speak, snatching the letter back and holding it up. "I have watched him keep his own accounts for the mill repairs. His letters are cramped, quick, practical, the hand of a man who writes because he must, not because he was taught fine penmanship in some scribe's schoolroom. This," she jabbed a finger at the elegant, looping script, "was written by someone raised to write beautifully, not usefully. That is not Nathan's hand. It is closer to yours, Elder Vashna, if I am honest, or to Thok's, whose father paid a bloodfin scribe to tutor him as a boy." The accusation landed like a dropped stone into still water. Thok's face darkened with outrage. Vashna's mouth thinned, but her voice, when she answered, stayed maddeningly level. "You would accuse an elder of this clan to protect your human," she said. "That tells its own story, child." "I would accuse anyone whose hand matches the letter," Sharamph said, "elder or not. Show me your own writing, Vashna, freely before the whole council, and let us compare it honestly, and if it does not match, I will apologize before every soul in this camp." For the first time since Sharamph had known her, Elder Vashna hesitated, a fraction of a second too long, and in that hesitation Borug's eyes, old but not blind, narrowed with sudden, dawning suspicion. "Bring your ledgers, Vashna," he said quietly. "Tonight, before the full council." Vashna did not bring her ledgers that night. By the time Borug sent men to her cottage to fetch them, she was gone, along with 2 of her personal attendants, and a saddled horse missing from the herd, and it was only then, searching her abandoned quarters, that they found the trove of correspondence hidden beneath a false floorboard. Letters from a bloodfin agent, promises of gold and land in exchange for the weakening of the Ashwalker clan's granaries and mills, all of it building, patiently, over more than a year, toward a moment when a starving clan, desperate for allies, might be forced to accept whatever alliance Vashna proposed on Bloodfin's behalf, an alliance that, notably, had originally been meant to be sealed by Sharamph's own marriage to a Bloodfin suitor. "She arranged the suitors," Sharamph said, sick understanding rising in her as she read through the letters by lamplight, Nathan silent and steady beside her. "Every one my father sent. She was never trying to marry me well. She was trying to marry me to whoever would let Bloodfin swallow this clan whole, and when I refused them all, she needed another way to force the alliance, so she sabotaged the mills, hoping hunger would make my father desperate enough to accept any terms Bloodfin offered. And when the mills were not enough," Nathan said grimly, "she sent riders to burn the granaries outright. With us standing watch as an unexpected complication she decided to remove. They did not have long to sit with the horror of it. Word came at dawn 2 days later, breathless and terrified, from a shepherd boy who had seen riders massing along the eastern approach to the plateau, more than the granary raid had brought, close to 50 strong, banners furled but unmistakably Bloodfin colors beneath their cloaks, moving fast toward the ridge where the tallest of the windmills stood. The mill the clan called the Old Mother, the first ever raised on the plateau, the one that ground the seed grain kept back for next year's planting. "She is not done," Borug said, grim-faced, already shouting orders to arm the camp. "If they burn the Old Mother and the seed grain with it, this clan does not merely go hungry this winter. It has nothing to plant come spring. We will be beggars at Bloodfin's table within a year, exactly as she planned." The clan rode out to meet the threat with everything it had, warriors mounting in ragged haste, and Sharamph rode at the front of them. Nathan at her side on a borrowed horse he handled with more competence than she expected. Having spent a childhood, she learned later, on a coastal farm before the sea called him away to shipbuilding. They reached the Old Mother ahead of the main Bloodfin force, but not ahead of its outriders. A dozen raiders already at the base of the tower with torches lit. And the fight that followed was brutal and fast. Sharamph's spear finding 2 men before they could touch flame to the mill's timber base. Nathan hauling a fallen clan warrior clear of a raider's axe with the same desperate strength he had used to save the child at the granary. But the main Bloodfin force was close behind, dust rising along the ridge road, and Borug, grim-faced, realized within minutes that they did not have the numbers to hold the tower and fight 50 riders both. "Fall back to the ridge line," he bellowed. "We cannot save the mill and the camp both if they flank us here." "We cannot lose the seed grain," Sharamph said, already scrambling up the tower's outer ladder before anyone could stop her, Nathan half a step behind, both of them driven by the same desperate calculation. The grain stores were kept in sacks lashed high in the mill's loft, above the milling floor, meant to be safe from damp and vermin. And if they could not save the whole tower, they might at least cut the loft ropes and drop the seed sacks clear before Bloodfin riders set the whole structure ablaze. They reached the loft just as the first arrows began thudding into the mill's outer walls. Fire arrows this time, catching in the old dry timber with terrifying speed, smoke already curling up through the floorboards from the milling level below. Nathan worked fast, cutting the lashings on the grain sacks with his belt knife, while Sharamph kicked open the loft's loading hatch, the one used to hoist sacks up from ground level, now their only way to get the grain clear before the whole tower became a chimney of fire. "There is no time to lower them by rope," Nathan shouted over the growing roar of flame below them, smoke thickening fast, the whole structure beginning to groan and shift as the fire ate into its bones. "The hoist mechanism is already burning." Below, through the smoke, Sharamph could see her father's warriors locked in fierce combat with the arriving Bloodfin force. And beyond them, mercifully, a hay wagon abandoned near the tower's base by fleeing camp workers, its bed piled high and soft with the season's last cut fodder. "Then we jump," she said, and did not wait for him to argue, shoving the first grain sack through the loft hatch to tumble down into the wagon bed below, and then the second, flames now licking visibly up through the floorboards behind them, the whole tower beginning to lean with a groan like a dying animal. "Sharamph, that is 3 stories," Nathan said, but he was already moving, already understanding there was no other way down, the ladder behind them now a column of fire. "Then hold on to me," she said, and grabbed his hand hard enough to bruise, and together they leapt through the loading hatch into open air, the burning mill tower behind them, the wind screaming past, the wagon bed rushing up to meet them impossibly fast. They hit the piled hay together in a tangle of limbs and dust, the impact driving the breath from both of them, and for one terrible heartbeat neither moved. And then Nathan was coughing, laughing, half sobbing with the shock of it, and Sharamph was hauling him up out of the hay by his collar to make sure with her own eyes that every part of him was still attached and working. Behind them, the Old Mother's tower folded in on itself in a great collapsing roar of flame and sparks, but the seed grain, most of it, lay scattered and safe in the wagon bed and the trampled grass around it, saved. The battle at the ridge broke not long after, Bloodfin's riders realizing. Once the mill they had been sent to burn was already lost, and the clan's full warband had arrived in force behind Borug, that the cost of pressing further had grown too steep, and they wheeled away south in a running retreat that the Ashwalker warriors did not bother chasing far, too exhausted, too relieved simply to have held their ground. It was 2 days later in the aftermath that a captured Bloodfin scout, questioned before the full council, confirmed what the hidden letters had already suggested. Elder Vashna had fled to Bloodfin territory the very night her deception was discovered, carrying with her what remained of her stolen influence. But she had left behind, in her haste, more than enough evidence to convict her in the eyes of every clan that would ever hear the tale. And Chief Borug sent riders to every neighboring clan, Bloodfin included, declaring her a traitor and an oath-breaker, her name struck from the Ashwalker rolls forever. Thok Bloodfin, for his part, swore before the council that he had known nothing of Vashna's scheming, that his own courtship of Sharamph had been honest if unwelcome, and though Sharamph did not entirely forgive him his old sneering contempt, she believed him enough not to press the matter further, especially once he rode home to his own clan looking, for the first time since she had known him, thoroughly chastened. It was Borug who came to find them that evening, at the small fire Sharamph and Nathan had built near the ruin of the old mother's foundation, still smelling of smoke, both of them bruised and singed but whole. The chief sat down across from them without ceremony, an old man suddenly, tired in a way Sharamph had rarely seen. "You saved the seed grain," he said. "Both of you. This clan plants in spring because a shipwright who never asked to be part of any of this climbed into a burning mill for people who, a season ago, would have run him off this plateau with spears." "I did not do it for the clan," Nathan said honestly. "I did it because Sharamph was going up that ladder whether I followed or not, and I was not about to let her do it alone." Borug looked at his daughter for a long moment, something working behind his gray-tusked face that Sharamph could not quite name, and then he said, quiet enough that only the two of them could hear, "Your mother, when she was young, refused 3 suitors my own father tried to arrange for me before I even knew her name. I did not court her by any custom our clan had a word for. I simply would not stop finding reasons to be near her until she stopped finding reasons to send me away." He shook his head slowly, looking into the fire. "I told myself, when you began refusing every man I sent, that you were being stubborn for its own sake. I see now you were only waiting for the one worth keeping." He looked at Nathan, and something in his weathered face softened just slightly, just enough. "You will have my blessing, shipwright, if my daughter still wants you once the smoke clears from both your heads. I think, watching you throw yourself off a burning tower for her, that she does." "I do," Sharamph said, and did not look away from Nathan's face when she said it, and did not care that her father sat right there to hear it. "I have wanted him since a broken axle and a man who did not flinch from me. I am not planning to stop." That night, once the fires had been banked low, and the camp had settled into the exhausted, grateful quiet that follows a battle survived, Sharamph led Nathan away from the tents, up along the ridge to where the surviving windmill still turned steady against the stars. And there, beneath the slow creak of sailcloth and timber, she pressed her palm flat against his chest, over the racing beat of his heart, and told him, in the old words her grandmother had taught her. The words a clan woman speaks only once, to the one person she means to keep for the whole of her life. "I claim you," she said, low and rough, "before wind and grain and turning wood, Nathan Holloway. Not because my clan sent you, not because any suitor's price was paid, but because I chose you with my own hands, twice, once at a broken wagon and once riding 2 days down a mountain, and I will choose you again every morning after this one if you will let me." Nathan's hands came up to frame her face, careful and certain, the calluses of a lifetime's honest work rough against her skin, and when he spoke his voice cracked only a little. "I never thought anyone would choose me at all," he said, "let alone someone who could have had any warrior on this plateau. I do not have a clan custom to answer you with, Sharamph. I only have this." He drew from his pocket a small, smooth ring he had clearly been carving in secret stolen hours, shaped from a scrap of the same golden oak he used in his ship hulls, polished until it gleamed like something far finer than plain wood had any right to. "I made it thinking I would never have the nerve to give it to you. I am giving it to you now." She took it, turned it in her fingers, feeling the careful, patient work of his hands in every smoothed edge, and then she kissed him there under the windmills with a fierceness that left no room for doubt in either of them. And what followed, in the warm dark of his small cottage on the ridge with the mills turning steady overhead like a slow heartbeat, was neither hurried nor hesitant, but a long, tender unraveling of two people who had spent too much of their lives braced for rejection, finally letting themselves be wanted completely. Skin and breath and whispered names, until the fear in both of them, at last, simply had nowhere left to live. A year turned over the Goldreach Plateau the way it always had, seed time and harvest, storms and clear gold afternoons, but it turned over a changed camp. The old mother was rebuilt by spring, taller and stronger than before, her new gears cut by Nathan's own hand under Dunrith's approving eye, and the clan had taken to calling her, quietly, the bride's mill, though no one said so where Sharamph could overhear it without laughing and threatening to throw somebody off the scaffold. Nathan kept his shipwright's tools but rarely used them for boats anymore, finding, up on that windswept ridge, more work than he could manage keeping a forest of aging mills turning through wind and snow, and the clan slowly, without any grand ceremony ever needing to declare it, simply stopped seeing him as the human and started seeing him as Nathan, the man who fixed the mills, who married the chief's daughter under a sky full of turning sails, who had jumped from a burning tower rather than let her face it alone. Down in Saltmere, word traveled slower, but it traveled, and by the time a year had passed, the harbor town had grown almost accustomed to the sight of an orc woman riding down twice a season to trade grain and visit old Cobb at the shipyard, who had taught Nathan his trade and never once, even in the beginning, doubted the boy had good sense buried somewhere under all that quiet. On a golden evening, a little more than a year after she had first ridden 2 days down a mountain for a man who never applied for her hand, Sharamph Ashwalker stood at the door of the small stone cottage she shared with Nathan Holloway on the eastern ridge, watching him climb down from the bride's mill's scaffold with sawdust in his hair, exactly as he had looked the very first time she saw him, and felt the same warm certainty settle through her that she had felt every day since. "Council wants you at the fire tonight," she called to him. "Dunrith is telling the story of the burning mill again. He adds a new detail every time. Last week you fought off 3 raiders single-handed before you jumped." Nathan laughed, wiping his hands on the rag tucked at his belt, and crossed the yard to catch her around the waist, pulling her close enough that she could feel the steady, familiar beat of his heart against her own. "Let him tell it however he likes," he said. "I only remember the part where you grabbed my hand and told me to hold on." "I remember that part too," Sharamph said, and kissed him there in the gold evening light with the mills turning slow and endless above them. Home in every direction the eye could see, and no suitor, no clan elder, no history of old wars between their 2 peoples standing between them anymore. Only this: a shipwright who had never asked to be chosen, and an orc woman who had chosen him anyway, and had never once in the year since regretted the 2 days it had taken her to find him.